A woman who lived in silence for 16 years receives a letter from the past that could change everything. When 8 Apache riders arrive with what the fire didn't burn, she's forced to confront what truly happened to her daughter, her husband, and the town that forgot her. Subscribe now and hit like. This unforgettable Western tale is waiting to be heard. They called her Mirren Gray, though she hadn't spoken her name out loud in 16 winters. The last time anyone heard her voice was the day the smoke rose black above the prairie and the earth swallowed her husband, her sister, and the child she had carried on her back. They called it the Coyote Rock Massacre, but she never did. To her, it was the day everything before turned to ash and everything after became silence. She had stayed on that hill where the massacre happened, rebuilding nothing, asking for nothing, waiting for no one. Her only companions were wind, dust, and the whisper of prairie dogs at dusk. Folks said she'd gone mad, and maybe she had. But only in the way someone who had once loved deeply must go mad to survive what came next. Each morning, she lit a lantern that no one ever saw. Each night, she sat on the old porch and stared westward, as if the past might ride in from the mountains one day. It was on the evening of the 16th year, when the air tasted like rain, but the sky stayed dry, that she saw them. 8 figures on horseback, silhouetted by the dying sun, riding single file down the ridge. Apache, not painted for war, not riding fast, but solemn like men carrying weight too old to shout. They stopped at the broken fence. None dismounted. One lifted a hand, not in greeting, but in permission. The youngest of the 8 rode forward, a letter in his hand. Leather-wrapped, yellowed, creased with age. He held it out without a word. She didn't move. Not until the wind shifted and carried the scent of smoke and pine. Then she stepped down from the porch, boots dragging like the past itself. Her fingers trembled when they touched the leather. She hadn't seen that handwriting in 16 years. The name on the back, Ronan Gray, her husband. Dead in the dirt. Buried with no marker. Yet here was his hand, his scrawl, alive, waiting to be read. She didn't speak, only turned, walked inside, and closed the door behind her. But the lantern stayed lit, just like it had every night since the fire. And what do you think was written? In the letter, a secret, a warning, or a confession? Tell us in the comments. She stared at the letter as if it were a living thing, something breathing slow under the cracked leather. Outside, the Apache hadn't moved. The youngest one still sat on his horse at the fence line, back straight, eyes watching the door. Inside, time folded. The fire in the hearth hissed with each pop of pine, and the old table where Ronan once carved initials with a hunting knife seemed to thrum with ghosted weight. Mirren's fingers slid under the strap. The paper inside was stiff, brittle, with age, but the ink was not faded, not entirely. His handwriting, all loops and hard angles, as stubborn and square as the man himself. She read slowly, her eyes skimming each word like they were nails driven through her ribs. If you're reading this, it means I never came home. You'll hear stories about that day. Don't believe any of them. What happened wasn't an ambush. It was betrayal. Her throat tightened. She had lived with that day branded into her. Bones replayed every angle, the shots, the fire, the screaming. No survivors. Only her, dragged from under timbers by a passing Kiowa scout. Too late to save anyone, but just in time to hear her own silence begin. She read on. I left something buried at the South Cross tree. Something they were willing to kill for. If you find it before they do, maybe this ends with more than silence. South Cross tree. She hadn't heard that name since before the baby. A cross-shaped oak that stood at the edge of the canyon where the sun always bled out red. She folded the letter slowly, her hand steady now. Ronan hadn't written with fear. He had written with intent, a purpose carved in ink. Her silence had not been hollow. It had been waiting. She stepped to the door, opened it, The Apache hadn't moved. The boy dismounted when she approached and handed her a second item, a smooth river stone with a painted sun etched across its face. "I knew your husband," the boy said. "He saved my mother from a fire when I was small." His voice was low, respectful, shaped by heat and memory. Mirren held the stone in one hand, the letter in the other. "Why bring this now?" she asked. "Because someone else is looking," he said. "Someone who thinks you don't matter anymore." She looked at the others beyond him. 7 riders unmoving, not as warriors, but as guardians. "I haven't ridden in 16 years, she said. The boy nodded. "Then we'll ride slow." She closed the door behind her, pulled on the old duster hanging by the nail, and stepped down into the dust. She didn't ask what they expected her to find, because she already knew. What was buried at South Cross Tree was never meant to stay buried. They rode at dawn, slow and deliberate, the hooves of their horses stirring up red dust like memory rising from a grave. The South Cross Tree lay 3 hours southeast, carved into the rim of the cliff like a wound the land never bothered to heal. Mirren hadn't set eyes on it since before the fire, before the blood, before her voice was taken. The trail had narrowed with time, brush reclaiming paths that once held wagon tracks and cattle drives. The Apache rode in silence, except the boy. His name was Tahoma, she had learned, who now and then pointed out changes in the land. "This used to be a water creek," he said, gesturing to a dry gulch. "Now only snakes drink here." Mirren didn't speak. Her voice, though unused, wasn't broken. She was simply careful now with what deserved words. Tahoma understood. He filled the quiet with story, not noise. As they neared the South Cross, the light grew thick, the sky dimmed to rose and clay. The oak tree appeared like a scar against the sky, split into a perfect X by wind or God, no one knew which. She remembered this place as a child. They used to call it the place where the earth prays. Ronan had once tied his rifle to the lowest branch and said, "When I die, I want the birds to perch on my bones here." Now she was back, and Ronan was waiting, not in body, but in what he left behind. They stopped 20 paces from the tree. Apache spread in a half circle, eyes sharp, hands near weapons. But there was no sound save for the rustling of sage. Mirren dismounted, knees stiff but determined. She walked toward the base of the tree, where a flat stone with a chip on one side leaned against the trunk. She knelt, brushing away years of dust. There, a shallow carving, to MG. Her breath caught. Beneath the stone was soft earth, blacker than the dirt around it. She dug with her hands, inch by inch, until something clicked. A box. Tin, weather-worn, rusted at the edges. Inside, a folded map, a locket with her child's initials, and a pouch filled with something that clinked. Gold coins, dull but real. Tahoma crouched beside her. "What is it?" he asked, but she was staring at the map, a route marked in red. From Coyote Rock to an unnamed bluff. Alongside it, coordinates. And beside that, a note, hastily written. "They're not dead." The girl. The sister. "If you find this, you know where to go. Trust no one in Hollow Creek." Mirren's hands began to shake. Her sister. Her child. She had buried them. Or thought she had. Tahoma's voice broke through. "We should go." She looked back at the others. 8 shadows on horseback, still. Watching. Like they already knew what she'd read. "Someone else is on that trail," Tahoma said. She nodded. Her silence wasn't protection anymore. It was a weapon. And it was time to unsheath it. "What do you think she'll find at Hollow Creek? Betrayal, survival, or something no one expects? Leave your theory below." Hollow Creek didn't look like a place where the truth could hide. But then again, Mirren knew better than most that rot always began beneath clean boards. She rode at the front now, the Apache flanking her from a distance as shadows instead of a shield. Tahoma stayed nearest, Eyes narrowed not in fear but familiarity. "I passed through here once as a boy," he said. Didn't like how folks looked at Silence. Mirren didn't answer. She hadn't come here for talk. She came because the map said this place held a grave she had never dug, and maybe a heartbeat she had never mourned. The sheriff's office stood crooked, paint peeling, the badge on the door dulled with rust. As she passed, the saloon doors fluttered, and two men stepped out. One tipped his hat, but not kindly. "You lost, ma'am?" he asked. Mirren looked at him without blinking. "I buried family not far from here," she said, her voice even, clear, the first words she had spoken to a stranger in years. He looked startled. "Not much left to bury around here." "Fire did most of that a long time back," she didn't respond. Just kept riding. They went to the edge of town, past the broken fence line, and down to where the trees crowded the earth. Again, there, between two split rocks, was a marker, small, wooden. The name barely legible. Ada Gray, her sister, below it. A second plank, smaller, no name. Just a red ribbon tied around the base. Her knees buckled as she fell beside it. "I buried her myself," a voice said behind her. Mirren turned. It was the old preacher. From the day of the fire, eyes watery, skin folded by time. "She was still warm," he said. "The girl. I thought she might live. But the doctor never came, so I laid her in the ground. I said her name." "You didn't tell me," she whispered. "You wouldn't see anyone," he said. "Not even the ones who tried." She looked down at the unnamed grave. Her child, not a dream, not a ghost. Real. Thom. They stood at a distance, watching her grieve without touching it. Then the preacher added, "But she wasn't alone." Mirren froze. "What do you mean?" "There was another girl. Smaller, darker hair. She was holding her hand when I found them." "She didn't burn?" "She ran," he said. "I saw her climb the hill. Never caught her name. But she left a letter. Gave it to a boy who passed through the following day." Tahoma stepped forward slowly. "I was that boy." The wind picked up, tossing dust into their mouths. Mirren's hand went to the pouch at her side. "The map, the locket. They weren't supposed to die that day," the preacher whispered. "Someone made sure they would." "Who?" she asked Doc, but the preacher only shook his head and said, "You already know the name." And she did. "What name do you think Mirren saw in her mind, and why was it worth killing for?" Share your thoughts below. The preacher didn't speak the name aloud, but it hung in Mirren's chest like a gun cocked and waiting. She had suspected it once, in the early days of her grief, when rage was still louder than sorrow, but Silence had offered her no proof, until now. She walked back into town like the trail had already chosen her feet, Tahoma at her side, his hand never far from the knife at his belt. The others stayed behind, guarding the grave, guarding the girl who might never have died at all. The sheriff's office was still quiet when she pushed the door open. Inside, Sheriff Clayton Dobbs sat behind the desk where he had once handed Ronan Gray his final badge. His hair had grayed and thinned, but his eyes remained the same sharp, amused, calculating. He looked up as if she were expected, as if 16. Years of silence were nothing more than a minute's pause. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Didn't expect to see a ghost this morning." Mirren didn't sit. "You lied about the fire," she said plainly. Dobbs leaned back, boots creaking on the old plank floor. "That so?" She took the map from her coat, laid it on the desk without unfolding it. "You knew where Ronan buried the ledger. You knew what was in it." He glanced at the paper without touching it. "Ain't no law against secrets, Mirren." Tahoma stepped forward. "There is when folks die for them." Dobbs's hand slid under the desk, but Mirren's voice stopped him cold. "I know about Hollow Creek. I know about the land sale. I know who signed it." Her eyes burned. "I know it was never the Comanche who lit that fire." The sheriff's mouth twitched once. Careful, he said. You're talking like someone who wants trouble. I already buried trouble, she said. Now I want names. The door behind her opened. One of the riders entered Gray Owl, the eldest. He carried the pouch Mirren had dug up at the South Cross tree. Without a word, he emptied it onto the desk. Gold coins, a broken compass, and a single scrap of parchment bearing 6 signatures. One of them read, Clayton Dobbs. The sheriff stared at it for a long moment, then exhaled slow through his nose. I suppose it's too late to say. It was just business. It was always blood, Mirren said. And it bought you silence. Until now. Dobbs didn't reach for his gun. Not yet, but his eyes flicked to the window. Movement. 3 men outside waiting. The town wasn't asleep after all, it was watching, just like it had on the day the fire took her life. Only this time, she was ready. She turned to Tahoma. Tell the others to get the children off the road. This town's about to remember what justice sounds like. He nodded once and slipped out the door. The sheriff stood, his hand no longer hiding. You going to kill me, Mirren? He asked, voice calm. No, she said. I'm going to speak. And when she did, the room, the town, the ghosts, everything stopped to listen. Mirren stepped into the center of the square, like she was stepping into a memory that had waited too long. The town didn't know what to make of her. Most folks thought she'd died years ago, swallowed by grief or madness or the prairie itself. Now here she was, standing atop the flatbed of an abandoned supply wagon, with the wind tugging at her coat and a piece of parchment held high in her hand like it was scripture. The Apache stood nearby, not guarding her, but bearing witness. Tahoma sat his horse behind her, watchful, silent. The townspeople gathered slowly, curious at first, then cautious as whispers passed like wildfire. The sheriff had slipped back into his office, door creaking shut like a warning. My name, Mirren began, voice hoarse but steady, is Mirren Gray. I've lived in silence for 16 years. Not because I had nothing to say, but because no one wanted to hear what I knew. A hush settled over the crowd. They told you it was Comanche, that the Gray farm burned because of them, that my husband died in an ambush, that my child never cried after the fire. But they lied, and I stayed silent, like they wanted, like they expected. She raised the parchment. This is a copy of the land contract my husband refused to sign, and these are the signatures of the men who burned him alive for it. Murmurs grew louder. Some folks stepped back. Others leaned forward. Sheriff Clayton Dobbs took gold to make sure the Gray land changed hands. It was never about the cattle. It was about the river under the land, the water rights, the transport routes, the freight line coming west. A woman in the crowd clutched her husband's sleeve. A young boy whispered, that's where they buried the wells. Mirren kept going. My child was found alive, for one night. And someone made sure she didn't live long enough to tell anyone. Someone paid for silence. The crowd turned toward the sheriff's office. Still closed, still dark. And someone, she said louder, has waited 16 years to speak. She paused, eyes sweeping the faces she once knew, once trusted. If you want to keep your heads bowed, if you want to say this never happened, then stay silent. But if you remember that night, the fire, the smoke, the screams, then speak. Speak now. At first, there was only wind. Then a man stepped forward, the old stable hand. I saw the sheriff ride out that night, he said. Said he was checking the fences, came back with blood on his boots. Another woman spoke. My brother helped move the Gray livestock after. Saw it he was paid double, not to ask questions. The floodgates opened. Voice after voice, memory after memory. It had always been there, under the dust, under the silence, waiting. Mirren stepped down. She didn't need to say more. The town had finally begun to speak. But just as the moment crested, a single rifle shot cracked through the sky. A bullet struck the dirt at Tahoma's feet. Everyone scattered. From the sheriff's office door, Clayton Dobbs stepped out, holding his old Winchester. "I told you," he shouted. "Some things stay buried for a reason." Mirren didn't flinch. "And I told you," she said, "some ghosts come back wearing boots. Do you think the sheriff will run, fight, or confess? Drop your thoughts in the comments." The air held still like it was afraid to move, as if the wind itself didn't dare interrupt what was about to happen. Sheriff Dobbs stood at the mouth of his office, rifle firm in his grip, eyes glassy with fury and regret. Mirren didn't move. She didn't reach for anything, didn't even blink. Behind her, the Apache hadn't drawn weapons, but they hadn't stepped back either. Tahoma's hand hovered at his knife, not out of panic but out of principle. Dobbs spit into the dirt. "You think this changes anything?" He growled. "You stand there, running your mouth, acting like the past means something now." Mirren's voice was calm. "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for the truth." Dobbs scoffed, but something in his face cracked, just a flicker. "You always were too damn noble," he said. "You and Ronan both. That's why they killed him. Couldn't buy him, couldn't bend him. So they broke him." "Who's they?" Mirren asked. "Say the names." Dobbs lowered the rifle just a breath. "You already know him. Leland from the bank. Barit, who wanted the freight route. Simmons from the mining trust. I just made sure no one stopped them." His voice wavered for the first time. "And you were supposed to burn with the rest." The words fell like stones. Gasps came from the crowd. A mother shielded her child's ears, but Mirren stood steady. "I didn't, and I didn't forget." Dobbs laughed, bitter and cracked. "Then shoot me. Get it over with." But she didn't. Instead, she stepped closer. "You want to die with a badge or with a name?" Dobbs faltered. The weight of silence pressed against his chest. The rifle dipped another inch. "I did what I thought would protect the town," he muttered. "The wrong people, yes, but we survived, didn't we?" "You survived," she said. "The town rotted." Dobbs looked to the side, as if for an escape that didn't exist. And then the unexpected happened. He tossed the rifle to the dirt. It clattered like gilt-made iron. "Take me," he said quietly. "Take me to the marshal." But before anyone could move, a single rider bolted from the far end of the street, one of the men who had been watching since the first speech. He wore a black duster and carried a repeater across his back. Tahoma shouted, "Behind you." Mirren turned just in time to see the glint of metal. The man wasn't aiming at Dobbs, he was aiming at her. A sharp crack split the air, one gunshot, one scream. But it wasn't Mirren who fell. Sheriff Dobbs had stepped between them. The bullet tore through his chest, spinning him back against the saloon post. Blood soaked his shirt, and for once, his face was clean of defense. He slumped, whispering, "Tell her, I never meant the girl." Then he was gone. Tahoma tackled the shooter before he could reload, and the others rushed in to tie him. But Mirren just stood over Dobbs's body, staring at a man who had worn two faces, and in his last breath, tried to wear a third. She didn't cry, she didn't shake. She only said, "This ends with me, not with another grave," and turned away from the blood. "Do you believe the sheriff redeemed himself at the end, or was it just too late?" Share below. They buried Dobbs just after sundown, beneath a mesquite tree at the edge of Hollow Creek, wrapped in canvas, no words spoken over the grave. He hadn't earned prayers, only memory. Mirren stood alone beside the fresh mound as the others packed. Up camp, the air smelled of dust, blood, and finality. But there was no time for mourning. Not really. Not when the man who shot at her had confessed two names before Tahoma silenced him. Leland and Simmons. The banker and the mine boss. Ronan had known all along. That ledger Mirren once thought was a myth, it was real. And it was still out there. They had ridden south, following the map's final markings, until the stars bent overhead and the hills changed shape. Tahoma dismounted first, eyes scanning the base of a rocky bluff shaped like a sleeping horse. He said it would be under. The left eye, Tahoma murmured, running his hand along the stone. Gray Owl stepped forward with a rusted pickaxe they'd salvaged from an old mining post. One by one, they chipped away at the ridge until a hollow space gave way. Inside, a tin box wrapped in leather. Inside the box, the ledger. Pages yellowed but legible. Names, dates, bribes, death orders, land theft. And on the final page, Ronan's handwriting, sharp and uneven. If you are reading this, they failed to kill you. I love you. Tell her who she is. Tell her her father didn't die a coward. Tell her the truth. Mirren's hands shook as she clutched the letter. Her, she whispered. The girl. Her daughter. Who had lived. Who had been taken or hidden. Why would Dobbs say he never meant the girl? Tahoma asked. Mirren closed the box. Because someone else did. Someone who knew the Gray Land wasn't just valuable, it was the key to breaking the route east. She turned to the others. They didn't just kill Ronan for silence. They took my child as leverage. Or protection, Gray Owl said. She could be alive, raised far from here. With another name. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the wind. Then we find her, Mirren said. We find the girl. Do you know where to start? Tahoma asked. Mirren opened the map again. In the bottom corner, Ronan had scrawled a small star, beside a word barely legible. Waterhouse. Tahoma looked up. That's a trading post. 2 days west, mostly Navajo. Then we leave at first light. And if the men who took her are still there? She met his gaze. Then they'll remember what they did. A gust of wind tore through the camp, lifting the fire's embers into the sky like scattered prayers. But no one spoke. Not anymore. Now was the time to ride. To reclaim what never should have been stolen. Who do you think raised the girl? An enemy, a friend, or someone caught in between? Guess in the comments. The road to Waterhouse wasn't paved with answers, it was carved with ghosts. For 2 days, Mirren rode in silence, the leather-bound ledger pressed against her chest like armor. Every turn of the trail echoed a memory, the way Ronan used to. Hum when the sun hit their cabin roof, the cries of her baby daughter in the morning fog, the exact pitch of the scream that broke the night of the fire. They reached the trading post before the sun had fully crested the eastern ridge. It wasn't much an adobe building with a tin roof and a corral full of more dust than horses, but it was alive. Navajo families gathered for flour, coffee, and news. No one seemed surprised to see Apaches ride in. But all eyes turned to the woman in the duster, whose silence said more than any badge ever could. A wiry man in his 60s stepped out of the post and blinked toward them. Been a long time since we saw a ghost with eyes like that, he said. Mirren didn't smile. I'm looking for someone, a girl. She'd be about 14. Taken. From Hollow Creek after the fire. Name unknown. The man chewed the inside of his cheek. Names don't matter much out here. Only how you treat people. Then tell me who she is, she said. He hesitated, but only a moment. We call her Eileen. Came to us as an orphan. Carried by an old woman who died 3 winters ago. Said the child had survived something big. Wouldn't speak for a year. Thought she was cursed. Now, he pointed. She sweeps my steps every morning. Mirren turned slowly. There she was. The girl, same hair, same cheekbones, but not the same eyes. These were darker, older. The girl looked up as if she had known this moment would come. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She just said, I know you. Mirren's knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She stepped forward, touched the girl's hand. What do you remember? The girl looked away. Not much. A fire. A dog. A name I forgot. Your name is Ada, Mirren whispered. And you were never meant to forget. A soft gust of wind danced through the square, as if time itself were exhaling. The girl swallowed hard. Are you my mother? I was, Mirren said, and I will be again if you want me to. The girl didn't answer with words. She only reached out, pressed her head to Mirren's shoulder. Tahoma dismounted, watching. From a distance, he didn't interrupt. Neither did the others. Who brought her here? Mirren asked the trader. The old woman never said, but she gave me something to hold until this day came. He went inside and returned with a small wooden box. Inside, a ring with Ronan's initials, a swatch of baby blanket, and a folded piece of paper. Mirren opened it. It was a note written in her husband's hand. If I don't return, give her to the wind. The wind will find her mother. She closed the box slowly. We're leaving, she said. Where to? The man asked. Mirren looked west, to the place where all of this began, where it has to end. And with the girl riding beside her, she turned her horse toward the horizon dot. Do you think the girl truly remembers her past, or is she choosing not to? Let us know your theory in the comments. The river had changed over 16 years. Where fire once danced in the treetops and smoke swallowed the sky, now only wind moved softly through tall grass and wildflowers. Mirren dismounted slowly, her daughter beside her, no longer called Eileen. No longer silent, Ada. She had begun using her true name again on the third day of travel. The first time she'd said it aloud, the others had all turned their heads, some with smiles, others with awe. It was as if the world had been waiting for her to remember herself. They stopped at the place where the cabin had once stood. Nothing remained but a few sunken stones and the stump of the South Cross tree. Mirren knelt beside the old ash ring, fingers brushing the soil. This is where they tried to erase us, she said quietly. This is where you were born. Ada sat beside her, silent. Then, do you still dream about it? Every night, Mirren replied. But now the dream ends differently. Ada opened her satchel and drew out the small wooden box from Waterhouse. She placed it on the ground between them. Then, let's finish the story. One by one, they buried its contents. The ring, the blanket, the letter. Each piece placed with reverence, not to forget, but to forgive. When they were done, Mirren took her daughter's hand and looked out across the valley. The Apache remained behind them, giving space, but their presence felt like a wall of memory, silent, strong, and unwavering. Tahoma approached last. There's talk, he said. Leland and Simmons are gone. Vanished from Canyon Hollow, maybe headed to Mexico, maybe dead. Mirren didn't ask how. She didn't need to. Does it matter? She asked. Not anymore, he said. You ended it. No, she said, glancing at Ada. She did. Tahoma nodded. What will you do now? Mirren looked toward the ridge. There's land near the river still untouched. Good soil. We'll rebuild. Plant things that last. Ada smiled faintly. And teach me how to ride without falling off. That too. As the sun dropped behind the hills, painting the world in gold, the two of them stood like statues, unbreakable and quiet. Not haunted anymore, just whole. The past hadn't disappeared, but it had finally spoken. And now silence could mean peace instead of pain. When they rode away that evening, the wind carried with it not the sound of fire, but the echo of something long buried, now freed.